On a bright afternoon, Big Shaq decided to step out for something simple. Life was busy, loud, and full of attention wherever he went, but sometimes he just wanted a moment that felt ordinary. That day, he chose McDonald's. To most people, it was just a fast food place, but to Shaq, it was comfort. He liked the smell of fries in the air, the quickness of the service, and the way people from all walks of life sat under one roof, sharing meals. He walked through the glass doors, expecting nothing unusual inside. The restaurant was filled with the everyday noise of life. Kids laughed loudly from a corner table, their happy meals spread out like treasures. Parents leaned over cups of coffee, tired but smiling as their children bounced in their seats. Teenagers scrolled on their phones, eating fries one by one, their backpacks piled beside them. At another table, an older man sat quietly with a small burger, staring out the window, as if lost in thought. To everyone else, this was just another day, another lunch hour. And that was exactly what Big Shaq wanted, just to blend in, even if only for a little while. He walked up to the counter, towering over most people, but wearing a casual jacket and a cap pulled low to keep the attention away. The staff behind the counter greeted him with polite smiles, probably recognizing who he was, but keeping their professionalism intact. He placed his order, nothing too fancy, just a burger, fries, and a drink. It was the kind of meal anyone could order, the kind of choice that made him feel more like everyone else than the famous figure people saw on stage. As he waited, he noticed the little details around him. A young mother trying to cut a cheeseburger in half for her toddler, a group of friends sharing jokes, their laughter filling the air louder than the background music. A worker sweeping the floor near the soda machine, humming to herself without a care. Shaq felt calm. He liked this balance of ordinary moments. No flashing lights, no cameras, no demands. Just people enjoying food. When his tray was handed to him, he thanked the cashier with a warm nod. Carrying it carefully, he looked around for a quiet spot. He chose a table near the window, where sunlight spilled across the surface. Sitting down, he unwrapped his burger slowly, savoring the steam that rose from the fresh bun. He took a sip of his drink, leaned back slightly, and for a moment, felt like he wasn't Big Shaq, the celebrity. He was just a man enjoying lunch in a fast food restaurant. Children ran past him, chasing each other toward the play area. Their shoes squeaking against the tiled floor. A boy spilled his fries and laughed as his father picked them up, shaking his head but smiling. Life was messy and noisy, but in that mess, there was something beautiful. Shaq tapped his fingers lightly against the table, a small rhythm only he could hear. He thought about how different this scene was from his usual days. Normally, people stopped him for photos, for handshakes, for conversations. Normally, he couldn't eat in peace without whispers following him from table to table. But here, in this moment, it was as if the world had agreed to leave him alone. People might have recognized him, but they respected his space. He could eat in peace, watch the world, and feel almost invisible. That ordinary peace was rare for him and he treasured it. Yet, what he didn't know was that this calm moment was about to change. As he dipped a fry into ketchup and popped it into his mouth, his eyes drifted across the room again. Nothing seemed out of place. Families, workers, teens, strangers. Everyone locked into their little worlds. And then, as he leaned forward to take another bite of his burger, he felt a gentle tug at his sleeve. It was small. It's almost too light to notice, but enough to make him turn. Standing beside him was a boy no older than 5. The child looked up at him with wide, serious eyes. His hands were clenched at his sides, his lips pressed tightly together as if he was holding in something heavy. Shaq blinked in surprise, setting his burger down slowly. He expected the boy to smile, maybe ask for an autograph, maybe say he liked his music. But there was no smile, no excitement. just a strange silence. At that moment, the restaurant's ordinary noise seemed to fade. The laughter, the chatter, the sounds of trays and chairs, they all dimmed in Shaq's ears as he focused on the small boy. The child stepped closer, leaned in, and whispered something so soft that only Shaq could hear. Whatever those words were, they changed everything. The boy's face was unlike anything Big Shaq had expected. Usually, when kids came up to him, they were bright-eyed, smiling, and eager to talk about his songs or ask for a high five. But this boy looked different. His cheeks were pale, and his lips trembled as if he was holding back tears. His eyes darted nervously around the restaurant before settling on Shaq again, wide and pleading. Shaq leaned down a little, trying not to draw attention. He whispered gently, "What's up, little man?" The boy took a shaky breath and moved closer, standing so near that his tiny shoulder almost brushed against Shaq's arm. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost swallowed by the hum of the restaurant, the boy spoke. It was only a handful of words, no more than a sentence, but they landed like a stone, dropping into Shaq's chest. The whisper was so quiet that Shaq wondered for a moment if he had heard it correctly. He blinked, his burger forgotten on the tray, his drink untouched. He looked at the boy again, trying to read his expression, trying to see if this was some kind of playful trick. But the boy wasn't laughing. He wasn't joking. His tiny hands were balled into fists at his sides, his body tense with fear. Whatever he had whispered, he meant it. Shaq's heart began to pound. He glanced around the McDonald's, suddenly seeing the place differently. A few seconds ago, it had been just a cheerful restaurant filled with ordinary moments. Now, it felt like a stage, hiding something darker, something unseen. The laughter of children in the play area sounded too loud, too forced. The chatter of parents and teens seemed distant, almost unreal. Shaq felt his skin prickle as he scanned the room. The boy tugged at his sleeve again, this time more urgently, his eyes begging Shaq to believe him. Shaq bent lower, speaking barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" he asked. The boy nodded, quickly, his small chin bobbing. And Shaq saw a single tear well up in the corner of his eye. It hit Shaq then. This wasn't the kind of thing a child would make up. Kids might invent stories about superheroes or monsters, but this was different. The weight of it pressed down on him, and for a moment, he felt the heavy responsibility of being the only one this boy had chosen to trust. Out of everyone in the restaurant, out of all the adults around, the boy had walked straight to him. Shaq's mind raced. He thought about ignoring it, brushing it off as a misunderstanding, but the look in the boy's eyes told him he couldn't. He thought about standing up, making an announcement, demanding answers, but that might scare the boy even more, and worse, tip off whoever the child was afraid of. No, he realized, this had to be handled carefully. The boy whispered again, repeating the words, almost pleading this time. Shaq felt the chill in his stomach grow colder. He could hear the sound of fries sizzling in the back, the clatter of a tray dropping, the shuffle of feet, but all of it blurred behind the urgency of that small, trembling voice. Shaq sat back in his chair slowly, his massive frame towering over the tiny child. He nodded just once, firm but calm, to show he understood. He reached out and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, steadying him. The boy looked a little less alone in that moment, but the fear in his eyes didn't vanish. Now Shaq had to decide. He wasn't just a customer anymore. He was the only lifeline this boy had. He knew one wrong move could make things worse. His heart thudded louder as he weighed his choices. He couldn't let on that something was wrong. He couldn't let the wrong person notice his reaction. He forced himself to look casual, as though he was still focused on his meal. He picked up a fry and popped it in his mouth, chewing slowly while his mind screamed with urgency. With his other hand hidden beneath the edge of the table, he reached for his phone. The boy's whisper echoed again in his mind. Impossible to forget, impossible to ignore. And that was the moment Shaq realized this ordinary day at McDonald's had just turned into something he would never forget. Big Shaq sat frozen for a few seconds, the boy's whisper replaying in his mind over and over. It was strange how only a few words could shake a man so deeply. The restaurant, just moments ago filled with the happy chaos of everyday life, now felt like it had been turned upside down. His ears caught every sound, the squeak of sneakers on the floor, the beep of the fry machine, the clatter of ice dropping into cups. But those noises didn't sound normal anymore. They sounded sharp, heavy, almost suspicious. He glanced around carefully. The boy's whisper had told him something serious, and now every person in the room seemed like they could be part of it. A man at the far end of the restaurant, sitting alone with his phone, was he watching them? A group of teenagers laughing loudly, were they just having fun, or trying to cover up something else? Even the mother near the window, helping her toddler with a Happy Meal, suddenly looked uneasy. Shaq didn't want to believe it, but the boy's words had planted doubt everywhere. The boy stayed close to him, almost hiding against his side. Shaq could feel the tension in the child's tiny frame, the way his little shoulders trembled. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a playful imagination. The boy was scared, and children don't fake fear like that. His wide, glassy eyes kept darting nervously, as if the very person he was afraid of might appear any second. Shaq leaned down again, lowering his deep voice to a gentle murmur. "It's okay, little man. You're safe here with me." But even as he said it, he wasn't fully sure. Safe in a crowded McDonald's. Maybe, maybe not. His chest tightened. He wasn't just a celebrity in that moment. He was a man faced with a choice. Most people would brush this off, assume the boy was confused, or let someone else handle it. But Shaq couldn't. He had always lived by the rule that if you had the strength to step in, you couldn't stand aside. He looked at the boy again and asked softly, "Where?" The child didn't point outright. Instead, he flicked his eyes in one quick direction, then quickly back down at the floor. Shaq followed the glance. His stomach dropped. At a table near the corner, a man sat stiffly with his back to the wall. He wasn't eating, wasn't drinking, just sitting, staring at nothing. Every now and then, he shifted in his seat, scanning the restaurant with quick, darting looks. His hands rested flat on the table, but they twitched every few seconds as though he was fighting impatience. Shaq's instincts told him this man was out of place. The boy pressed closer to Shaq's side, confirming what Shaq already feared. That was the person. That was the reason for the whisper. For a moment, Shaq's mind went blank. He was a performer, a personality, a man who knew how to entertain crowds, but he wasn't trained for situations like this. Yet here he was, the only adult the child trusted, and the only one who knew something was wrong. His throat went dry as he swallowed hard. He thought about simply walking out, taking the boy with him quietly. But what if that made things worse? What if the man noticed? What if the boy wasn't the only one in danger? The entire restaurant could be at risk. The weight of the moment hit him fully then. He realized this wasn't just a decision for himself. It could affect everyone in that building. Every parent sipping coffee, every teen scrolling on their phone, every worker refilling cups of soda. The boy's whisper had pulled him into a reality he couldn't escape from. Shaq's pulse thudded in his ears. He looked at the man again, trying to memorize every detail: his build, his movements, the way his eyes shifted. He knew he couldn't ignore it. He couldn't pretend nothing had happened. The boy's whisper had forced him into the center of something dangerous. And in that moment, realization struck him like a lightning bolt. He had to act, not later. Not in 5 minutes. Not after he finished his meal. Right now, but how? That was the question that tangled in his mind. He couldn't just jump up and cause chaos. If he panicked, everyone else would panic too. If he made the wrong move, the man in the corner could notice, and the situation could spiral out of control. Shaq knew he had only 2 choices: ignore the whisper and live with the guilt, or trust the boy and step into a situation he didn't fully understand. And for Shaq, there was never really a choice. His huge hand slid beneath the table, brushing against his phone again. He wasn't ready to call yet, not without thinking carefully, but he knew the time for calm was slipping away. The boys. Trembling body against his arm reminded him of that with every passing second. Shaq took a deep breath, steadying himself. This wasn't a stage. This wasn't a performance. This was real life, and he had just realized it might be one of the most important moments of his life. Shaq sat there, towering but silent. His massive frame almost too big for the small McDonald's chair. His mind was racing faster than it ever had on stage or in front of cameras. He had been in front of thousands of people before, rapping, performing, making crowds laugh. But this was different. This wasn't about entertainment. This was about safety. The boy's whisper still burned in his ear, and now it pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't ignore. The boy stayed close. His little body pressed against Shaq's side as though he had found a wall of protection. Shaq placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder, steadying him. "It's all right, I got you," he murmured. But inside, he wasn't so sure. His eyes flicked back toward the man in the corner. Something about him didn't fit. He hadn't ordered food. His table was empty except for a crumpled napkin and a half-filled cup. He wasn't on his phone like most people. Instead, he kept scanning the restaurant with quick, sharp looks, his jaw tight, his posture stiff. Shaq had seen people try to look casual before, but this man wasn't casual. He was waiting. For what? Shaq couldn't tell. But the boy's whisper made it clear. It wasn't something good. Shaq's instincts told him to act now, stand up, to confront the man directly. His size alone would be enough to intimidate most people. But then he thought again. What if the man had something dangerous on him? What if his sudden move caused panic? There were families, children, workers, people who had no idea what was happening. One wrong move and the entire restaurant could explode. Into chaos, he glanced at the boy. His small fingers were gripping the side of Shaq's jacket, clutching it like a lifeline. That look in his eyes, raw fear, trust, desperation, told Shaq everything he needed to know. This wasn't the time to be reckless. This wasn't about being a hero in the flashy sense. This was about being smart. Shaq's breathing slowed. He had to make a choice. Do nothing and risk the boy being retore. Take action and possibly save more than one life. The decision formed quickly in his chest. He knew he couldn't sit back. He had been given this moment for a reason. The boy hadn't whispered to anyone else, hadn't run to the workers, hadn't gone to his parents. He had chosen Shaq, and Shaq wasn't about to let him down. The question now was how to act without making it obvious. His phone was in his pocket, heavy and silent. He could call 911, but even that had to be done carefully. If the man in the corner noticed, things could turn bad fast. Shaq reached under the table, pulling the phone out slowly, making sure his movements were hidden by his broad frame. He unlocked it with a quiet tap, the bright screen glowing faintly against his hand. The boy glanced at the phone, then at him, as if already knowing what Shaq was about to do. But Shaq hesitated for just a second longer. He scanned the restaurant again, memorizing exits, counting people. There were 2 doors, one near the counter, one toward the side by the play area. Families sat scattered, maybe 30 people in total. If something went wrong, could he get them all out? Could he block the man in the corner if he tried to move? His mind ran through every possibility, like a chess player planning 10 moves ahead. The boy tugged lightly on his sleeve again, snapping him out of his thoughts. His eyes were wide, his lips trembling as if to say, "Please, do something now, Shaq's." Jaw clenched. The decision was made. He would call, but he also knew he couldn't show fear. If the man in the corner was watching, Shaq had to look calm, natural, almost bored. So he picked up a fry, dipped it into ketchup, and chewed slowly, his other hand sliding the phone low under the table where no one could see. His thumb hovered over the dial pad. For the first time in a long time, Shaq felt small inside. Not because of his size, but because of the responsibility resting on him. He wasn't just a customer eating lunch. He was the difference between safety and danger for everyone in that room. And so, with his heart pounding but his face calm, Big Shaq made the decision to act. He wasn't sure how this would end. He wasn't sure if he would regret it. But he was sure of one thing: ignoring the boy's whisper was not an option. He pressed his thumb against the screen. Pulling up the emergency number, the path was set. Shaq's fingers hovered over the glowing screen of his phone. 3 numbers. Just 3 simple taps stood between him and the help the boy so desperately needed. But those 3 numbers felt heavier than anything he had ever dialed before. He glanced down at the child, who was still pressed close to his side. The boy's lips were pale, his breathing shallow. He wasn't saying anything now, but his eyes were loud enough. They screamed, "Please don't wait any longer." Shaq's thumb pressed 9. The soft click of the button echoed in his head, louder than the chatter of the whole restaurant. He pressed 1, then paused. His chest tightened as his eyes darted toward the corner again. The man was still there, still restless, still shifting in his seat, scanning the room with sharp glances. Shaq quickly looked away before their eyes could meet, with his head slightly bowed, his massive shoulders curved forward. Shaq pressed the final 1. The phone rang. Every second of that ring seemed endless. His heartbeat was pounding so loudly he was sure someone would hear it. He picked up another fry with his free hand, chewing slowly, pretending nothing unusual was happening. To anyone watching, he looked like just another man scrolling on his phone. But under the table, his thumb trembled slightly as he gripped the device. 911, what's your emergency? A calm female voice answered. Shaq leaned in close to the phone, lowering his voice until it was barely a whisper. This is Big Shaq. I'm at a McDonald's right now. A child just came to me. He's scared. He whispered something serious. I need officers here immediately. There was a pause on the line. Sir, can you tell me the exact location of the McDonald's you're in? Shaq gave the address quickly, glancing at the menu board above the counter to double-check the street. Name? He kept his tone steady, almost casual, though inside he felt like his chest might burst from pressure. The operator's voice was calm but sharp. What did the child tell you? Shaq's eyes flicked to the boy, then to the man in the corner. He bent lower over the phone, whispering so softly that no one else could hear. He repeated the words the boy had said to him, the chilling whisper that had pulled him into this storm. The line went quiet for a beat. Then the operator's tone changed, more urgent. Sir, stay calm. Officers are on their way. Do not confront the individual. Keep the child safe, and, if possible, position yourself near an exit. Shaq swallowed hard, nodding even though she couldn't see him. Understood. He tried to keep his breathing steady as he slipped the phone slightly under the tray, hiding the glowing screen from view. Around him, the restaurant buzzed with life. A worker called out another order number. Kids in the play area squealed. A soda machine hissed as someone filled their cup. None of them knew what was unfolding only a few feet away. The boy tugged his sleeve again, whispering, "Did you tell them?" Shaq gave him a firm nod, his deep voice low but reassuring. "Yeah, little man. Help is coming. Just stay close to me." But even as he said it, Shaq knew the hardest part wasn't over. It had just begun. Calling 911 was only the first step. Now he had to wait, and waiting was the most dangerous part. He had to act normal, keep the boy calm, and somehow avoid drawing the attention of the man in the corner. The seconds dragged. Every laugh, every shout, every shuffle of feet felt louder, sharper, more threatening. Shaq's eyes never stopped moving. He was a mountain of calm on the outside, chewing fries, sipping his drink, even leaning back casually in his chair. But inside, he was coiled like a spring, ready to move if he had to. He pictured the police cars speeding toward them. Sirens off, lights hidden, trying to arrive without alerting the suspect. He pictured them bursting through the doors, scanning the restaurant, spotting the man. But until that moment came, it was just him and the boy, two unlikely allies holding on to a fragile thread of safety. The phone was still in his hand, the operator's voice faint but steady. "Stay with me, sir. Officers are 2 minutes out. Keep talking to me if you can. You're doing great." Shaq gave the smallest nod. 2 minutes. Just 120 seconds. Yet, as he glanced at the man in the corner again, Shaq felt that those 2 minutes might stretch longer than any show, any performance, any moment in his life. He whispered into the phone again, so softly it was almost breath. "We're waiting." And with that, the stage was set. Asterisk, the moment Shaq ended the whisper to the 911 operator, time seemed to twist. 2 minutes. That's what the dispatcher had promised. But in those 2 minutes, the world inside the McDonald's felt like it had stretched into hours. Every sound, every movement, every glance became sharper, heavier, more suspicious. Shaq sat still, forcing his body to look calm. He picked up another fry, dipped it slowly in ketchup, and chewed as though he had nothing on his mind. But inside, his pulse was racing like a drum. He was a man used to noise, to chaos, to crowds screaming his name. Yet here, surrounded by families eating burgers and children chasing each other, the silence inside his chest was the loudest thing he had ever felt. The boy pressed closer against him, sliding half under Shaq's arm. Shaq adjusted slightly, letting his massive frame shield the child. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a simple, kind gesture, a celebrity giving a shy fan some attention. But for the boy, that closeness was a shielded wall of safety against the danger sitting only a few tables away. Shaq's eyes moved carefully around the restaurant. The mother with the toddler still struggled with her child's food. The group of teens laughed too loudly at a video on their phones. The worker behind the counter filled orders one after another, oblivious to the storm brewing under their roof. None of them knew that something dark was hiding among them. None of them knew that the man in the corner might be the reason police cars were racing toward the restaurant at that very moment. Shaq dared to glance at him again. The man was restless, tapping his fingers on the table, shifting in his seat. His eyes kept scanning the room, sharp and cold, like someone waiting for a signal. Shaq felt the boy flinch when the man's head turned their way. Quickly, Shaq moved, his drink pretending to adjust the straw, blocking the man's line of sight. 1 minute had passed. Shaq took a sip of his drink, his face calm, his body relaxed. But under the table, his grip on the phone was tight, his knuckles white. The operator's voice was still in his ear, low and steady. "Officers are close. Just keep calm." "I'm calm," Shaq whispered back, though he knew he was anything. But Dodd the boy tugged lightly at his jacket, whispering so softly Shaq had to lean down to hear. "He keeps looking at me." Shaq's jaw tightened. He wanted to stand up, to roar across the restaurant, to make the man stop. But he couldn't. Not yet. The police were close. He couldn't risk spooking the suspect before backup arrived. Instead, he placed his huge hand gently over the boy's tiny one. "Don't look at him. Look at me," Shaq said softly. "You're safe right here." Two kids dashed past their table, giggling as they chased each other toward the play area. Their laughter broke through the tension for just a second, and Shaq envied their innocence. They had no idea. To them, this was just a normal day, just a fun afternoon with friends. He wished he could freeze time for them, keep their world simple and safe forever. Another minute passed. Shaq shifted in his chair, making it look like he was just stretching. In reality, he was positioning himself between the boy and the man in the corner, his body forming a barrier. He scanned the exits again. If something happened before police arrived, he knew he'd have to act fast. He pictured himself grabbing the boy, rushing to the nearest door, shouting for everyone to run. He hated planning for chaos, but he had no choice. The boy whispered again, his voice trembling. "What if he gets up?" Shaq lowered his head, his deep voice quiet but firm. "If he gets up, I'll be right here. I won't let anything happen." To you, the words were simple, but they carried weight. And Shaq meant every one of them. Outside, faint in the distance. Shaq thought he heard something, a siren, muted, growing louder. He didn't look toward the windows. He didn't want to give anything away. But hope flickered in his chest. They were close. Help was almost here. Still, those last seconds stretched on forever. The man in the corner shifted again, standing halfway, then sitting back down. Shaq's muscles tensed like a coiled spring. He was ready to move, ready to protect, ready to fight if he had to. His entire life had prepared him to be strong on stage. Strong in the spotlight, but now, strength meant something completely different. Strength meant silence, patience, protection, and so he waited. Every nerve in his body burning, every second stretching into eternity. His eyes locked on the boy, his ears straining for the sound of doors opening. His heart pounding like a drum calling for backup. The wait was almost over. But the danger was not. The minutes dragged like hours. And then finally it happened. The faint sound of tires against asphalt reached Shaq's ears. Muffled but clear enough to slice through the noise of the restaurant. He didn't dare look toward the windows, but his body knew before his mind did. Help had arrived. He stayed perfectly still, chewing on a fry as if nothing at all was unusual. The boy pressed tight against his side, glanced up at him with hopeful eyes, as if asking silently, "Is this it? Are they here?" Shaq gave the smallest nod, his face calm, but his heart hammering in his chest. The glass doors of the McDonald's swung open. Two police officers walked in, first dressed in plain clothes, not uniforms. To the untrained eye, they looked like any other customers, maybe office workers grabbing lunch. But Shaq spotted the radios clipped discreetly to their belts, the way their eyes scanned the room with quick, practiced sweeps. Behind them, almost unnoticeable at first, came two more officers in uniform. They moved in quiet formation, spreading slightly to cover angles. They didn't rush, didn't shout. Their presence was silent but sharp, like the sudden drop in air before a storm. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly, though most people didn't even realize why. A mother scolded her child for spilling juice. A group of teens laughed too loudly at a TikTok video. The staff kept calling out order numbers, but Shaq felt the change. It was like the walls themselves had gone tense. The boy noticed too. Clutched Shaq's jacket tighter, whispering so softly that only Shaq could hear. They're here, right? Yes, Shaq murmured, eyes fixed on the corner. They're here. Stay still. The man at the corner table shifted again. His eyes flicked toward the doors, then back to his empty cup. For the first time, Shaq saw a flash of something across the man's face. E.S. 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 Sinnies. He knew. He could feel the storm closing in. The plainclothes officers split up. One walked toward the counter, pretending to study the menu. The other moved near the play area, casually pulling out his phone as if scrolling. But Shaq noticed how both kept their eyes locked. Darting quick glances toward the man in the corner, the uniformed officers moved slower, stopping near the entrance. One of them leaned down as if tying his shoe, but Shaq caught the way his hand brushed the edge of his holster. Everything about their movements screamed preparation, control, precision. Shaq's body tightened like a coiled spring. He wanted to move, to shield the boy completely, but he knew sudden action could set the man off. So he stayed put, a giant wall of calm in the middle of the storm, his hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder to keep him steady. Then, it happened. One of the plainclothes officers, the one near the counter, gave the smallest nod. In an instant, the quiet inside the restaurant cracked. The uniformed officers surged forward, their voices firm and commanding. "Sir, stay where you are. Hands on the table now." The man in the corner shot up from his chair, his napkin falling to the floor. Gasps erupted around the restaurant. Parents grabbed their children, pulling them close. A tray of food clattered to the ground as someone scrambled out of the way. Shaq's heart thundered as he pulled the boy fully into his side, shielding him with his massive arm. "Stay down," he whispered firmly. "Don't look." The man froze for a split second, his hands twitching as if deciding whether to run, but the officers were faster. One grabbed his arm, another pressed him against the wall, their movements sharp and practiced. Chairs screeched, tables rattled. The normal hum of McDonald's had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. The suspect shouted something, his voice muffled by the commotion. The officers barked louder commands, their tones slicing through the panic. Customers ducked, some clutching their kids, others holding phones up to record. The world had flipped in seconds. Shaq kept his eyes on the boy, not the suspect. The boy's tiny body trembled, his face buried against Shaq's chest. "It's over, little man," Shaq whispered softly, though his own heart was still racing. "You're safe now." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed louder than the fry machine, louder than the chatter, louder than everything. The man was pinned, his arms locked behind his back. The officers moved quickly, pulling him toward the door, their eyes still scanning, still alert, and just like that, the man was gone, dragged out into the daylight, where squad cars now lined the street. The restaurant was left in stunned silence. Fries sat cold on trays. Drinks spilled across tables. Kids clung to their parents. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy, like everyone was trying to process what had just happened. Shaq leaned back in his chair, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The boy finally loosened his grip, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. "They got him," Shaq said, his deep voice steady, comforting. "You did the right thing." And though the restaurant was filled with whispers and shaken voices, for that boy, for that moment, Big Shaq was the only voice that mattered. The restaurant slowly settled. But it wasn't the same place it had been minutes ago. The smell of fries still hung in the air, the soda machines still hissed, and trays of food still sat on tables. But now, everything felt heavier, quieter, as if the walls themselves were catching their breath. People whispered in low voices, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Parents held their children tighter. Workers peeked nervously toward the door, their hands trembling as they cleaned up spilled drinks and dropped trays. And at the center of it all sat Big Shaq. Still in his chair, the boy pressed against his side. The man in the corner was gone, taken away in handcuffs, but the echo of his presence lingered. Shaq could still see him in his mind, the restless tapping of his fingers, the sharp dart of his eyes. Even though the danger had been removed, the memory clung stubbornly to the air. The boy finally loosened his grip. He looked up at Shaq with wide eyes, red from holding back tears. For a moment, the child said nothing. Then, in a trembling voice, he whispered, "Thank you." Shaq's heart softened. He gave the boy a small nod, his deep voice steady. "You were brave. Braver than most grown-ups I know." A police officer walked over then, kneeling down beside the boy with a gentle smile. "You did the right thing by telling him," the officer said softly. "Not many kids would have been so smart or so strong." The boy looked down shyly, gripping Shaq's sleeve again. Though unsure how to take praise, the officer stood and turned to Shaq. "We'll need a statement. But for now, just know you made the right call. If you hadn't acted so fast, things could have gone very differently." Shaq nodded, though he didn't need the reassurance. Deep down, he already knew. But hearing it confirmed the weight of what had just happened. It hadn't been paranoia. It hadn't been a false alarm. That whisper had been real, and his decision had mattered around them. People slowly returned to their meals, though the atmosphere wasn't the same. Some parents looked over at Shaq with nods of respect. Others whispered his name to their kids, explaining who he was. But to Shaq, none of that mattered. At that moment, he wasn't Big Shaq, the celebrity. He wasn't a performer, a figure of entertainment. He was just a man who had listened when a child needed someone to believe him. The boy's mother rushed in then. She had been in the restroom when it all happened. Her face went pale when she saw the officers, the shaken crowd, and finally her son clinging to Shaq's side. She dropped to her knees, pulling the boy into her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered over and over, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Shaq leaned back, letting them have their moment, his own chest heavy with emotion. He knew that mother would never forget the sight of her son's fear. And the boy, he would never forget the moment he chose to whisper instead of staying silent. When the officers finally came back to him with a notepad, Shaq stood tall, answering every question clearly. He described the man, the boy's whisper, the minutes of waiting, the way the suspect had shifted in his chair. His deep voice was calm, steady, unshaken though inside. He knew he would replay this day for a long time. As the officers left with their notes, Shaq sat back down, his meal long cold. He looked at the untouched burger, the limp fries, the watered-down drink. What had started as an ordinary lunch had turned into something extraordinary, something terrifying, yes, but also unforgettable. He glanced out the window, where flashing lights painted the parking lot in red and blue. The man was gone. The danger had passed. Yet the weight of the whisper lingered, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. Shaq stood to leave, adjusting his jacket as the boy waved at him shyly from his mother's side. He gave the child a nod, a silent promise that he'd remember this day too. Then he stepped out into the daylight, the cool air washing over him. For the rest of the world, it was just another afternoon. Cars drove by, people walked down the street. The city carried on as usual. But for Shaq, and for one brave little boy, everything had changed. And as he walked away from the golden arches glowing behind him, Shaq knew one thing with absolute certainty. No stage, no spotlight, no performance would ever compare to the moment when he had chosen to act not as a celebrity, but as a protector. Because sometimes it only takes a whisper to change everything.